8 million people, share the most densely packed city in America using an invisible rulebook that nobody wrote down. New York City pulls in roughly 64 to 67 million visitors a year, nearly matching that pre-pandemic record of 66.6 million. And every single one of those visitors steps into a system of NYC unwritten rules that no one teaches, no guidebook covers, and absolutely everyone enforces. None of them qualify as laws. You won't find signs posted anywhere, but they carry as much weight as anything on the books, and they develop for reasons that become completely logical once you understand the math behind them. What makes this worth talking about is that New York didn't invent this. Tokyo runs on its own version. London drills mind the gap and stand on the right into every commuter's muscle memory, and Paris operates on cafe etiquette, where you greet before ordering, or the staff pretends you don't exist. Dense cities everywhere build these systems organically. New York just skips the politeness when you break them. A New Yorker will sigh loud enough for you to hear it, correct you out loud, or physically shoulder past you without a second thought, and that feedback loop hits instantly. So here's what we're covering: the actual rules across sidewalks, subways, bodegas, and personal space, along with the reasons each one exists. The sidewalk. Manhattan packs roughly 70,000 to 110,000 people into every square mile depending on the neighborhood, and about 41% of all trips across New York City happen on foot. That foot traffic isn't joggers or tourists on a stroll, it's commuting infrastructure carrying millions of people to work, to food, to errands every single day. The numbers tell the story better than anything. MIT's Cityform Lab measured approximately 1,697 pedestrians per sidewalk segment per hour during Midtown evening peaks. On Black Friday alone, over 1 million visitors flood Manhattan's retail corridors. What that means in practice is that New York sidewalks function as a traffic system, just one that lacks painted lines. The rules that govern this system stay consistent everywhere in the city. Walk on the right because sidewalks operate as two-way streets, and never stop abruptly because the 40 people walking at pace behind you now have to split around you like water hitting a rock. If you need to check your phone or snap a photo, pull to the building side first. Groups walk single file or in pairs rather than 3 or 4 across, blocking the full width. And nobody congregates at choke points like subway exits, staircase tops, doorways, or crosswalk corners. Keep pace or drift to the building side because the center of the sidewalk serves as the fast lane. This rule becomes especially critical in high-density tourist zones like Times Square, where pedestrian volumes can reach over 2,000 people per hour per lane. Grand Central Terminal and Penn Station represent the ultimate test cases, where commuter flows merge with tourist foot traffic in spaces designed decades before today's volume requirements. Escalators follow the same logic with stand right, walk left as the universal expectation, and that rule gets violated by visitors constantly. NYC Department of Transportation's own pedestrian level of service study turned up a finding that reframes all of this. Walking speed wasn't most affected by total crowd volume. It was affected by the proportion of impeded pedestrians, which meant that the crowd itself didn't slow people down. The people in the crowd who didn't know the system created the drag. The subway. The nearly 1.3 billion subway trips ran through the MTA system in 2025, with over 4 million riders on peak weekdays pushing the network to 85% of pre-pandemic levels. 4 million people a day flowing through narrow platforms and train doors that stay open for seconds at a time leaves zero room for improvisation. And that's exactly why the rules feel so rigid. The most important one comes first, and it's the one tourists break more than any other. Let passengers off the train before you board and stand to the sides of the doors rather than planting yourself directly in front of them. Breaking this single rule generates more visible frustration from locals than almost anything else a visitor can do. Once you board, move to the center of the car instead of clustering near the doors, because the middle often sits half empty while the entrance area stays jammed. Payment runs through the Omni tap system or MetroCard swipe, and having it ready before you reach the turnstile keeps the flow moving. Holding doors open feels polite but costs thousands of riders their time because delays on one train cascade across the entire line. Backpacks come off during rush hour, held low or tucked between your feet, and taking up extra seats drew enough complaints that the MTA launched a courtesy counts campaign with illustrated posters targeting manspreading, backpack etiquette, door holding, and loud music. And then there are the two rules that confuse visitors the most, which involve not making sustained eye contact and not starting conversations with strangers. That behavior reads as coldness from the outside, but it functions as a coping mechanism for being pressed into intimate physical proximity with people you've never met. One rule cuts through all of that social withdrawal though, and it's non-negotiable, offering your seat to someone elderly, pregnant, or disabled. The bodega. Somewhere between 13 and 14,000 bodegas operate across New York City, with the NYC Department of Health citing around 13,000 and the United Bodegas of America reporting approximately 14,000 members. These aren't convenience stores in any normal sense of the word. Each one runs as a neighborhood institution, open 24/7, functioning as an informal community hub with its own ordering language. The protocol moves fast. Know your order before you reach the counter, because the line behind you represents a collection of people who all need to be somewhere else. Go to the deli counter for your sandwich and not the register, since those run as separate operations. Speak the shorthand. Where BAC on a roll, SPK means bacon, egg, and cheese with salt, pepper, and ketchup. SCC means sausage, egg, and cheese. And chopped cheese, everything means it comes with lettuce, tomato, onion, and condiments. The chopped cheese itself originated in Harlem bodegas in the 1990s as New York's answer to the Philly cheesesteak, becoming a cultural touchstone that represents bodega efficiency at its finest. You name your bread, your protein, and your toppings in one concise burst, then have your payment ready. Then step aside and wait for your number. Done well, this whole exchange wraps up in under 30 seconds. A quick rhythm of mutual efficiency between two people operating on the same principle. That principle sits underneath every rule in this city. And it's simple: respect other people's time. Personal space, the paradox. Back in 1966, anthropologist Edward T. Hall published a book called The Hidden Dimension and introduced the concept of proxemics, which maps how humans use physical space in social interactions. Hall broke it into 4 zones, with intimate distance covering 0 to 18 inches and reserved for your closest relationships. Personal distance spanning 1.5 to 4 feet for friends and family, social distance running 4 to 10 feet for normal conversation, and public distance stretching beyond 10 feet for formal settings. Americans typically maintain about 4 feet during conversation, which makes what happens on a rush hour subway car so striking. New Yorkers routinely tolerate under 2 feet of space with complete strangers, which falls squarely into Hall's intimate distance zone, the one he reserved for romantic partners and immediate family. Entering that zone with strangers happens multiple times a day in New York, and the coping strategy comes from what sociologist Irving Goffman called civil inattention, a brief glance to acknowledge someone's presence, followed by an immediate withdrawal of attention. Headphones go in, eyes drop, body movement shrinks to a minimum, and what looks like coldness from the outside actually operates as psychological architecture for surviving at extreme density. And this is where the paradox kicks in. New York tolerates extraordinary physical closeness, where being pressed against a stranger on the train barely registers. But social intrusion, meaning prolonged eye contact, unsolicited conversation, or asking someone how their day goes while you're both waiting for a chopped cheese, that breaks the contract. Visitors from lower density environments tend to read New York's physical tolerance as an invitation for social engagement, but the opposite holds true. The physical closeness itself is exactly why the social distance exists. Why all of this exists. Not one of these rules appears in any official document. Each one emerged organically from the collision of extreme density, constant time pressure, A mix of movement modes, sharing narrow infrastructure including pedestrians, cyclists, delivery workers, wheelchairs, and strollers, plus a 24/7 rhythm where the city never empties enough for the rules to relax. MIT's City Form Lab, led by researcher Andrei Sevtsuk, released something in February of 2026 that puts all of this into perspective. The first complete map of pedestrian traffic, covering every sidewalk, crosswalk, and footpath in all of New York City, calibrated with NYC DOT counts from 2018 and 2019. For the first time, the data shows what New Yorkers have always felt in their bodies: the sheer volume of human movement that makes these invisible rules not optional but necessary. Those 67 million annual visitors contribute roughly $79 billion to the city's economy, making efficient tourist integration more than just courtesy. Probably the most famous line in New York pedestrian history belongs to Dustin Hoffman in Midnight Cowboy from 1969, reportedly ad-libbed when a real taxi nearly hit him during filming, and "I'm walking here" became shorthand for an entire philosophy. That philosophy boils down to the idea that your right to move through this space and my right to move through this space both depend on us following the same unwritten rules. None of this grew out of rudeness. Density built it. Put 70,000 people in a square mile, give every one of them somewhere to be, and social systems take shape on their own. Sidewalks develop lanes, the subway develops choreography, bodegas develop a language, and personal space stops being a physical concept and becomes a psychological one. 8 million people negotiating shared space with strangers, thousands of times a day, with no written instructions. That's not chaos. That's cooperation at a scale most cities never have to attempt. And every dense city on Earth runs its own version of the same game. New York just doesn't pretend otherwise.